The presence of Colonel William Harrison completely changed the dynamics of the confrontation. The retired military officer stood with perfect posture and commanded immediate respect from everyone in the crowd. His weathered face showed the dignity of someone who had spent decades serving his country with honor. The tourists and wedding guests naturally moved closer to the colonel, creating a clear division between those who supported the royal guard and Marcus, who now stood virtually alone. Marcus felt the shift in the crowd, but his wounded pride would not allow him to retreat gracefully. He had invested too much of his reputation in this confrontation to simply walk away now. The humiliation of backing down in front of so many people seemed worse than continuing to fight a battle he was clearly losing. Marcus turned his attention back to the royal guard with even more desperation in his voice. "I do not care who anyone else is or what they think," Marcus declared, his voice cracking slightly under the pressure. "This is between me and this guard, and I will not be intimidated by a crowd of strangers. I have legal rights here, and I demand that they be respected. I paid good money for permission to use this location, and I will not be denied what I have purchased." Sergeant James Morrison remained perfectly still throughout the entire confrontation, but something had changed in his demeanor. The presence of Colonel Harrison and the clear support of the crowd had reinforced his confidence in maintaining his post. James felt proud to represent the honor and tradition of the Royal Guard in front of people who clearly understood and respected military service and duty. Colonel Harrison stepped forward and addressed Marcus directly, his voice carrying the authority of decades of military command. "Young man, you are making a complete fool of yourself and embarrassing your family name. That guard is performing his duty with honor and dignity while you are behaving like a spoiled child who cannot accept being told no. You should apologize immediately and remove yourself from this situation before you cause any more damage to your reputation." The colonel's words hit Marcus like physical blows because they contained truth that he could not deny or argue against. Deep down, Marcus knew that his behavior had been inappropriate and embarrassing, but his pride prevented him from admitting his mistakes publicly. Instead of accepting the colonel's advice, Marcus doubled down on his position with even more aggressive language. "I will not be lectured by anyone about my behavior," Marcus shouted, his face now bright red with anger and embarrassment. "I am a paying customer with legitimate rights, and I will not be intimidated into accepting poor service. This guard is being unreasonable and unprofessional, and I have every right to demand better treatment." The crowd began to murmur with obvious disapproval at Marcus' continued defiance. Several people started shaking their heads and making comments about entitled behavior and lack of respect. The tourists who had initially been entertained by the drama were now clearly uncomfortable with the ugliness of Marcus's outburst. Even some of his own wedding guests looked ashamed to be associated with him. Sarah could no longer bear to watch her new husband destroy himself publicly. She approached Marcus one final time and grabbed his arm firmly, trying to physically pull him away from the confrontation. Her eyes were filled with tears of embarrassment and disappointment as she pleaded with him to stop making the situation worse. "Marcus, please, I am begging you to stop this right now," Sarah said, her voice breaking with emotion. "You are ruining our wedding day and embarrassing both of our families. People are recording everything, and this will follow us forever. Please, just walk away and let us find somewhere else to take our photos." For a moment, Marcus looked at his bride and seemed to waver in his determination. He could see the pain and embarrassment in her eyes and realized that his actions were hurting the person he claimed to love most. But his pride and stubbornness were stronger than his love or his common sense. Marcus pulled his arm away from Sarah and turned back to face the royal guard with renewed aggression. "No," Marcus declared firmly. "I will not walk away from this. I will not let some stubborn guard ruin the most important day of my life. They've done nothing wrong, and I will not be treated like a criminal for making a reasonable request." It was at that moment that Sergeant James Morrison finally decided to speak. He had maintained his professional silence throughout Marcus's entire tantrum, but the situation had reached a point where a response was necessary. James turned his head slightly to look directly at Marcus, and when he spoke, his voice carried the quiet authority of someone who had earned the right to be heard. So James said in a clear voice that carried across the entire courtyard, "I serve the crown, not your credit card. I have taken an oath to protect this royal residence, and I will not abandon my post for any private citizen, regardless of how much money they have spent or how loudly they complain." The crowd erupted in spontaneous applause at the guard's response. People cheered and whistled their approval, while several tourists began taking photos and videos of the guard who had finally spoken. The simple dignity of his words stood in stark contrast to Marcus's aggressive demands and entitled attitude. Even some of Marcus's own wedding guests joined in the applause, clearly impressed by the guard's professionalism. Marcus stood frozen in shock at the guard's response and the crowd's reaction. He had expected the guard to either give in to his demands, or at least engage in an argument that Marcus could try to win. Instead, the guard had delivered a devastating response that perfectly summarized the entire situation. Marcus realized that he had been completely outmaneuvered by someone he had underestimated. Colonel Harrison stepped forward and began clapping, slowly and deliberately, while looking directly at James with obvious respect and approval. "Well said, Sergeant," the colonel declared loudly. "That is exactly the kind of response we expect from our finest guards. Your dedication to duty is a credit to your uniform and your service." The photographers and videographers in the crowd captured every moment of Marcus' humiliation. His face went through a series of expressions from shock to anger to dawning realization that he had lost completely. The expensive wedding that was supposed to make him look important and impressive had instead become a public demonstration of his poor character and entitled attitude. Sarah burst into tears and ran away from the scene, no longer able to watch her husband embarrass himself and their families. Several wedding guests followed her, offering comfort and support while clearly distancing themselves from Marcus's behavior. The elaborate wedding celebration that had cost hundreds of thousands of pounds was falling apart because of Marcus's inability to accept a simple no. Marcus looked around at the crowd of people who were all clearly against him, and finally began to understand the magnitude of his mistake. The god had won the confrontation without raising his voice or abandoning his dignity, while Marcus had revealed himself to be exactly the kind of entitled, privileged person that most people despised. The perfect wedding day he had planned so carefully had become a nightmare that would haunt him forever. The royal guard returned to his position of attention and resumed his silent vigil as if nothing had happened. His dignity and professionalism remained intact while Marcus's reputation lay in ruins around him. The tourists began to disperse, taking their photos and videos with them to share with the world. Marcus Thompson had gotten his memorable wedding after all, but not in the way he had intended. Roberto Martinez walked slowly down the dusty street toward his small house. His work boots made soft sounds on the dirt road. The sun was setting behind the mountains and painted the sky orange and pink. He carried his lunchbox in one hand and his hard hat in the other. His blue work shirt was dirty with cement and paint from another long day at the construction site. The street where Roberto lived was not like the nice neighborhoods in the city. There were no smooth roads here, no streetlights that worked properly. Most of the houses were small and old. Some had broken windows covered with plastic sheets. Others had roofs that leaked when it rained. Children played in the dirt yards because there were no parks nearby. Roberto did not mind living in this poor area. What worried him every single day was his daughter Sophia. She was 8 years old, and the most important thing in his whole world. Sophia had been born with something called spina bifida. This meant her spine did not grow the right way before she was born. Because of this problem, Sophia could not use her legs to walk like other children. When Sophia was a baby, Roberto did not know much about her condition. He thought maybe she would get better as she grew older. He prayed every night that one day she would stand up and walk to him. But as the years passed, Roberto learned that Sophia would never walk on her own. The doctors explained that her legs would always be weak. She would need help to move around for her whole life. Roberto worked very hard to take care of Sophia by himself. Her mother had left them when Sophia was only 2 years old. She said she could not handle having a disabled child. Roberto never spoke badly about her to Sophia. He just told his daughter that her mother had to go away. But deep inside his heart, Roberto felt angry and sad that Sophia's mother had given up on them. Every morning Roberto would wake up very early. He made breakfast for Sophia and helped her get dressed for school. Then he would carry her in his arms to the old wheelchair they used. The wheelchair was borrowed from a neighbor whose grandfather had died. It was heavy and hard to push. One of the wheels made a loud squeaking sound. The seat was torn and uncomfortable. But it was the only way Sophia could move around when Roberto was not carrying her. Roberto would push Sophia to the bus stop for disabled children. The bus came to pick up kids who could not walk to regular school. Sophia always looked excited to go to school. She loved learning new things and playing with her friends. But Roberto could see sadness in her eyes too. He noticed how she watched other children walking and running while she sat still in her wheelchair. Roberto lifted heavy bags of cement and painted walls of new buildings. His hands became rough and cut from the hard work. His back hurt every evening from bending and lifting all day. But Roberto never complained about his job. He was grateful to have work that paid him enough money to buy food and medicine for. Sophia, the other workers at the construction site, were good men. They knew about Roberto's situation with Sophia. Sometimes they would share their lunch with him when his food was not enough. They also helped him leave work early when Sophia had doctor appointments. Roberto appreciated their kindness, but he never asked for help. He was proud and wanted to take care of his daughter by himself. When Roberto came home from work every day, Sophia would be waiting for him. She did her homework at the small table in their kitchen. The house only had 3 rooms. There was a kitchen that was also used for eating. There was one bedroom where both Roberto and Sophia slept, and there was a tiny bathroom with a shower that did not always have hot water. Sophia was a very smart girl. She got good grades in all her subjects at school. Her teachers said she was one of the best students in her class. Sophia loved to read books and draw pictures. She drew flowers and trees and houses with big gardens. She also drew pictures of children playing and running. Sometimes she drew pictures of herself standing and walking with other kids. Roberto would sit with Sophia while she did her homework. He could not help her much because he had only finished elementary school himself, but he always told her how proud he was of her good work. After homework, they would eat dinner together. Roberto cooked simple meals like rice and beans or soup with vegetables. They did not have much money for expensive food, but Roberto made sure Sofia always had enough to eat. The hardest part of every day for Roberto was bath time and bedtime. Sofia needed help with everything. Roberto had to lift her from her wheelchair to the bathroom. He helped her wash and get dressed in her pajamas. Then he carried her to their bed. Sofia slept on the inside of the bed next to the wall so she would not fall out during the night. Before Sofia went to sleep, she always asked Roberto to tell her a story. Roberto was not good at making up stories, but he tried his best. He told her about brave princesses and magical animals. Sofia's favorite stories were about children who could fly or run very fast. She would close her eyes and imagine herself in these stories. Sometimes Sofia would ask Roberto difficult questions before falling asleep. She would ask why she could not walk like other children. She would ask if she would ever be able to ride a bicycle or play sports. Roberto never knew what to say to these questions. He would just hold her hand and tell her that she was perfect exactly the way she was. But inside his heart, Roberto felt terrible pain knowing that his daughter wanted to do things she could never do. After Sofia fell asleep, Roberto would sit alone in the kitchen. He drank coffee and thought about their life. He worried about money because doctor visits were expensive. He worried about Sofia's future and what would happen to her when she grew up. Most of all, he worried that he was not doing enough to make his daughter happy. Roberto had dreams of giving Sofia a better life. He wanted to move to a nicer house with a garden where Sofia could sit outside in the sunshine. He wanted to buy her new clothes and toys. He dreamed of taking her on trips to see the ocean or the mountains. But with his small salary from construction work, these dreams seemed impossible. The neighbors in their area were mostly kind to Roberto and Sofia. The older women would sometimes bring them food when they cooked too much. The children in the neighborhood played gently with Sofia when she was outside in her wheelchair. But Roberto could see that Sofia felt different from everyone else. She was always watching other people do things instead of doing them herself. Roberto noticed that Sofia's happiest moments were when she was moving. She loved it when he pushed her wheelchair fast down the small hills near their house. She would laugh and ask him to go faster. She also loved when he carried her on his shoulders and walked around the neighborhood. From up high, Sofia could see over the walls and fences. She felt free and happy when she was moving through the world instead of sitting still. As Roberto prepared for bed each night, he made the same promise to himself. He promised that somehow he would find a way to give Sofia more freedom and happiness. He did not know how he would do this, but he never stopped hoping and thinking about it. One sunny Saturday morning, Sofia woke up excited because she did not have to go to school. Roberto had promised to take her to the small park near their neighborhood. This park was not fancy like the parks in rich areas of the city. It had old swings that creaked when children used them. The slide was rusty and the paint was peeling off. But for Sofia, this park was a magical place where she could watch other children play and have fun. Roberto pushed Sofia's wheelchair along the bumpy dirt path that led to the park. The wheelchair made its usual squeaking sound with every turn of the wheels. Sofia did not seem to mind the noise. She was looking around at everything they passed. She pointed at the birds flying overhead and the flowers growing wild beside the path. Her eyes were bright with happiness just to be outside in the fresh air. When they reached the park, Sofia's expression changed. She became quiet and thoughtful as she watched the other children. A group of boys and girls were riding their bicycles in circles around the park. They were laughing and calling to each other as they raced. Their bicycles were different colors, red and blue and yellow. Some had baskets on the front. Others had streamers hanging from the handlebars that fluttered in the wind. Sofia watched the children with such intense focus that Roberto could feel her longing. She leaned forward in her wheelchair as if she wanted to join them. Her hands gripped the armrests tightly. Roberto could see tears starting to form in her eyes, but she was trying hard not to cry. She did not want to seem ungrateful for the trip to the park. A little girl with brown hair rode her pink bicycle close to where Sofia was sitting. The girl was about the same age as Sofia. She had a big smile on her face and her hair was flying behind her as she pedaled. When she saw Sofia in the wheelchair, she stopped her bicycle and walked over to them. The girl introduced herself as Maria and asked Sofia if she wanted to be friends. Sofia's face lit up with joy. She loved making new friends. Maria was curious about Sofia's wheelchair and asked why she could not walk. Sofia explained in her simple way that her legs did not work the same as other people's legs. Maria listened carefully and did not seem scared or uncomfortable like some children did when they met. Maria asked Sofia if she had ever tried to ride a bicycle. Sofia shook her head sadly and explained that bicycles were made for people who could use their legs to pedal. Maria thought about this for a moment. Then she had an idea. She offered to push Sofia around the park while she sat in her wheelchair so Sofia could feel what it was like to move fast like the other children. Roberto was touched by Maria's kindness. He helped Maria position herself behind Sofia's wheelchair. Then Maria began to push Sofia around the park. At first she pushed slowly because she was not sure if Sofia would be scared, but Sofia immediately asked her to go faster. She wanted to feel the wind in her hair like the children on bicycles. Maria pushed Sofia faster and faster around the park. Sofia began to laugh with pure joy. Her laughter was so infectious that other children stopped playing to watch them. Soon several children were taking turns pushing Sophia around the park. They made a game of it, seeing who could push her the fastest without being dangerous. For the first time in her life, Sophia felt like she was flying. The wind rushed past her face and made her hair dance. She could feel the excitement and freedom that came with moving quickly through space. She understood now why the children loved their bicycles so much. Moving fast made her feel alive and free in a way she had never experienced before. Roberto watched his daughter with mixed emotions. He was happy to see Sophia laughing and having fun with the other children, but he also felt deep sadness knowing that this was just a temporary experience. When they went home, Sophia would go back to sitting still in her slow, squeaky wheelchair. She would go back to watching other people move while she stayed in one place. After an hour of playing, the children had to go home for lunch. Maria hugged Sophia goodbye and promised to come back to the park the next Saturday. The other children also said goodbye to Sophia and told her they had fun playing with her. Sophia waved goodbye to all her new friends, but Roberto could see the sadness returning to her eyes. On the walk home, Sophia was unusually quiet. She sat in her wheelchair looking down at her hands instead of pointing out interesting things they passed like she usually did. Roberto tried to cheer her up by suggesting they stop for ice cream, but Sophia just shook her head. She was lost in her own thoughts. When they reached their house, Roberto lifted Sophia from her wheelchair and carried her inside. He set her down at the kitchen table where she usually did her homework and played with her toys. But instead of playing, Sophia just sat there staring out the window. Roberto could tell that something important had changed in his daughter's mind during their trip to the park. Finally, Sophia looked up at Roberto with serious eyes. She asked him a question that broke his heart. She wanted to know if there was any way she could ever have a bicycle of her own. She explained that she had felt so happy when the children pushed her fast around the park. She wanted to feel that freedom and joy again, but she wanted to be able to create that feeling by herself. Roberto sat down next to Sophia and took her small hands in his big rough ones. He wanted to give her hope, but he also did not want to make promises he could not keep. He explained that regular bicycles were made for people who could use their legs to pedal. He had never seen a bicycle that could be used with hands instead of feet. Sophia listened to Roberto's explanation, but she did not give up on her dream. She asked if someone could make a special bicycle just for her. Maybe someone could build a bicycle that she could pedal with her hands instead of her feet. Her eyes were full of hope as she asked this question. Roberto felt his heart breaking as he looked at his daughter's hopeful face. He wanted to tell her that anything was possible, but he knew how expensive special equipment for disabled people could be. He had looked into buying Sophia a better wheelchair, but even the cheapest ones cost more money than he made in several months. Roberto told Sophia that special bicycles for people who could not walk did exist, but they were very expensive. He explained that they would need to save money for a very long time to buy one. Sophia nodded, but Roberto could see disappointment in her eyes. She understood that they did not have much money and that her dream bicycle would have to wait. Night after Sophia fell asleep, Roberto sat in the kitchen drinking coffee as usual. But instead of just worrying about money and the future, he found himself thinking about Sophia's question. Was there really no way to get her a bicycle she could use? She had been so happy at the park when she was moving fast. She deserved to feel that joy whenever she wanted. Roberto began to think about the bicycles he had seen at the park. He thought about how they worked and what made them move. The children used their feet to push pedals that turned the wheels. The handlebars helped them steer left and right. It seemed like a simple machine when he really thought about it. An idea began to form in Roberto's mind. What if he could figure out how to make a bicycle that Sophia could operate with her hands instead of her feet? What if instead of buying an expensive special bicycle, he could build one himself? Roberto had always been good at fixing things. He had learned to repair many different machines and tools during his years of construction work. Roberto stayed up very late that night thinking about his idea. He drew simple pictures on pieces of paper, trying to figure out how a hand-operated bicycle might work. He made many mistakes and crossed out many drawings, but he did not give up. For the first time in years, Roberto felt excited about a project that could change Sophia's life. The next morning, Roberto woke up earlier than usual. He had spent most of the night thinking about his idea to build a special bicycle for Sophia. His mind was full of pictures and plans, but he knew he needed to learn more about how bicycles actually worked. He had ridden bicycles when he was young, but he had never taken one apart to see all the pieces inside. Roberto made breakfast for Sophia as always, but she noticed that her father seemed different today. He was more excited and energetic than usual. When Sophia asked if something good had happened, Roberto just smiled and told her he was thinking about a special project. Sophia was curious, but Roberto said he would tell her more about it later. After Roberto dropped Sophia off at the school bus, he did not go straight to his construction job. Instead, he walked to the old junkyard on the other side of town. This junkyard was where people brought broken cars and machines that they did not want anymore. Roberto had been there many times before looking for spare parts to fix things around their house. The owner of the junkyard was an old man named Carlos who had known Roberto for several years. Carlos was always friendly to Roberto because he knew about his situation with Sofia. When Roberto explained that he was looking for old bicycles or bicycle parts, Carlos became very interested. He wanted to know why Roberto needed these things. Roberto told Carlos about his idea to build a hand-operated bicycle for Sofia. He explained how happy Sofia had been at the park when she could move fast, and how much she wanted a bicycle of her own. Carlos listened carefully, and then his face broke into a big smile. He told Roberto that he thought it was a wonderful idea and that he would help however he could. Carlos led Roberto to a corner of the junkyard where several old bicycles were stored. Some were missing wheels, others had broken chains or bent frames, most were rusty and had not been used for many years. But Roberto looked at them with new eyes. He could see the potential in these broken machines. Roberto spent 2 hours at the junkyard looking at all the bicycle parts. He asked Carlos if he could take some of the old bicycles and parts. Carlos refused to let Roberto pay for them. He said that any father who would work so hard to make his daughter happy deserved all the help he could get. Roberto felt grateful for Carlos's kindness. Roberto loaded the bicycle parts into Carlos's old truck, and Carlos drove him to work. Roberto was late for his construction job, but his boss understood when Roberto quickly explained about the special project for Sofia. The other workers were also excited when they heard about Roberto's plan. They offered to help him in any way they could. All day while Roberto worked, he thought about the bicycle parts. During his lunch break, he drew more pictures on pieces of paper. He tried to figure out how to change the foot pedals so that Sofia could use her hands instead. He thought about where to put the pedals and how to connect them to the wheels. After work, Roberto went home and carried the bicycle parts to the small shed behind their house. This shed was where Roberto kept his tools and worked on fixing things. It was not very big and the roof leaked when it rained hard, but it was Roberto's workshop and he felt comfortable there. Roberto spread all the bicycle parts on the floor of the shed. He had wheels of different sizes. He had chains and gears and pedals. He had handlebars and seats and metal frames. Looking at all these pieces, Roberto felt both excited and overwhelmed. He knew this project would be much harder than anything he had ever tried to build before. When Sofia came home from school, she found Roberto in the shed surrounded by bicycle parts. Her eyes grew wide with surprise and excitement. She asked Roberto what he was doing with all the bicycle pieces. Roberto knelt down next to Sofia's wheelchair and took her hands in his. Roberto told Sofia about his plan to build her a special bicycle that she could operate with her hands. He explained that it would take a long time and that he was not sure if he could really make it work, but he promised Sofia that he would try his best to give her the bicycle she dreamed about. Sofia began to cry tears of joy. She could not believe that her father was going to try to build her very own bicycle. She hugged Roberto tightly and told him that he was the best father in the whole world. Roberto felt his heart fill with determination. He would find a way to make this bicycle work no matter how long it took. Over the next few weeks, Roberto spent every evening in his shed working on the bicycle project. After Sofia went to sleep, he would go outside with a flashlight and work on the bicycle parts. Sometimes he worked until very late at night. His hands became cut and dirty from handling the rusty metal pieces. Roberto started by cleaning all the bicycle parts. He used soap and water and steel wool to remove the rust and dirt. Some parts were too damaged to use, so he had to go back to Carlos's junkyard to find replacements. Carlos was always happy to help and never asked Roberto to pay for anything. The hardest part of the project was figuring out how to make the hand pedals work. Roberto tried many different ideas. First, he tried to put regular pedals up high where Sofia could reach them with her hands. But this did not work well because Sofia's arms were not strong enough to turn the pedals in that position. Then Roberto had the idea to use a different kind of motion. Instead of pedals that went around in circles, he thought about pedals that moved back and forth like rowing a boat. This seemed like it might be easier for Sofia's hands and arms. Roberto spent many nights trying to build this new kind of pedal system. Roberto also had to think about the size and height of the bicycle. Sofia was small and her wheelchair was low to the ground. The bicycle would need to be the right height for her to get on and off easily. Roberto measured Sofia many times to make sure he got the dimensions right. The neighbors started to notice that Roberto was working on something in his shed every night. Some of them were curious and asked what he was building. When Roberto told them about the hand bicycle for Sofia, they were amazed. Many of them offered to help with the project. An old woman named Rosa, who lived next door, brought Roberto sandwiches and coffee while he worked. She said she admired what he was doing for Sofia and wanted to support him. A young man named Diego, who was good with machines, offered to help Roberto with the more complicated parts. Roberto was grateful for all the help, but he wanted to build most of the bicycle himself. This was his gift to Sofia and he wanted it to come from his own hands and heart. He only accepted help when he really could not figure out how to do something on his own. After a month of working, Roberto had made good progress on the bicycle. He had cleaned and repaired all the parts he needed. He had built a new frame that was the right size for Sofia. He had figured out how to make hand pedals that moved back and forth instead of around in circles, but Roberto was still not satisfied with his work. The bicycle looked rough and unfinished. The metal was gray and ugly. Roberto wanted Sofia's bicycle to be beautiful and special. He wanted her to be proud of it when she rode it in front of other children. Roberto decided that he needed to paint the bicycle to make it look nice, but paint costs money that Roberto did not have. He had already spent his small savings on food and medicine for Sofia. Roberto wondered how he could make the bicycle beautiful without spending money they did not have. Then Roberto had a creative idea. He remembered that his construction job sometimes required him to paint walls. Sometimes there was leftover paint that would be thrown away if no one used it. Roberto asked his boss if he could take some of the leftover paint for a personal project. Roberto's boss was happy to let him have the extra paint. Roberto collected small amounts of different colors over several weeks. He had blue paint and red paint and yellow paint. None of the colors matched perfectly, but Roberto thought he could mix them to create something beautiful for Sofia. Roberto also realized that he needed to test the bicycle to make sure it was safe before Sofia tried to ride it. He was worried that something might break or not work properly. Roberto spent many evenings checking every part of the bicycle and making sure everything was strong and secure. Finally, after 2 months of hard work, Roberto felt ready to paint the bicycle and prepare it for Sofia to see. He was nervous and excited at the same time. He hoped that all his work would make Sofia happy and give her the freedom she wanted so much. Roberto stood in his small shed looking at the hand bicycle he had been building for 3 months. The frame was complete and all the parts were working together. The hand pedals moved smoothly back and forth. The wheels turned properly when he tested them. The seat was comfortable and positioned at the right height for Sofia, but the bicycle still looked plain and unfinished. Roberto had collected different colors of leftover paint from his construction job. He had small cans of blue paint and red paint and yellow paint. He also had some white paint and a little bit of green paint. None of the colors were very bright because they were old paint that had been sitting around for a long time. But Roberto was determined to make something beautiful for Sofia. Roberto decided to paint the bicycle frame bright blue because that was Sofia's favorite color. She had told him many times that blue was the color of the sky and the ocean. Sofia loved to look at the sky and dream about flying like the birds. Roberto thought the blue paint would remind Sofia of all the things she loved about the color blue. But Roberto spent an entire Saturday afternoon painting the bicycle frame. He used an old brush that was rough and worn out. The paint did not go on smoothly at first. Roberto had to paint each part several times to make sure the color was even and bright. His hands became covered in blue paint, but he did not mind. He was happy to be working on something so important for his daughter. While the blue paint was drying, Roberto worked on painting the other parts of the bicycle. He painted the wheels bright red to make them stand out. He used yellow paint for the hand pedals so Sofia would be able to see them clearly. He painted the seat white to make it look clean and special. The handlebars were painted green to add more color to the bicycle. When Roberto finished painting, he stepped back to look at his work. The bicycle was now colorful and bright. It looked completely different from the rusty old parts he had started with. Roberto felt proud of what he had created, but he also felt nervous. He wondered if Sofia would like the bicycle and if it would really work the way he had planned. Roberto decided to test the bicycle himself before showing it to Sofia. He was much bigger than Sofia, so he had to be careful not to break anything. Roberto sat on the bicycle and tried to use the hand pedals. At first it felt strange to pedal with his hands instead of his feet. But after a few minutes, Roberto got used to the motion and was able to make the bicycle move forward. Roberto was excited to discover that the bicycle worked even better than he had hoped. The hand pedals were smooth and easy to use. The bicycle moved at a good speed and was easy to steer. Roberto rode the bicycle around inside the shed several times to make sure everything was working properly. He checked the brakes and the steering and all the connections between the different parts. After testing the bicycle, Roberto realized that he needed to add some special touches to make it even more perfect for Sofia. He remembered that Sofia loved flowers and pretty things. Roberto did not have any decorations to put on the bicycle, but he had an idea. He could use the remaining paint to draw flowers and designs on the bicycle frame. Roberto was not a good artist, but he tried his best to paint small flowers on the blue frame of the bicycle. He used white paint to make simple flower shapes. He added yellow centers to the flowers and green stems with leaves. The flowers did not look perfect, but they were made with love, and Roberto knew that Sofia would appreciate the effort. Roberto also painted Sofia's name on the bicycle frame in big white letters. He wanted everyone to know that this was Sofia's special bicycle. Under her name, Roberto painted a small heart to show how much he loved his daughter. When he finished all the decorations, Roberto stepped back to admire his work. The bicycle now looked truly special and unique. It was colorful and bright with flowers and Sofia's name painted on it. Roberto felt a deep sense of satisfaction and accomplishment. He had never built anything so complicated before, but he had succeeded in creating something wonderful for his daughter. Roberto covered the finished bicycle with an old bedsheet to keep it clean, and to surprise Sofia, he planned to give her the bicycle on her 9th birthday, which was coming in 2 weeks. Roberto could hardly contain his excitement as he thought about Sofia's reaction when she saw her special bicycle for the first time. During the next 2 weeks, Roberto had trouble sleeping because he was so excited about giving Sofia her birthday present. He kept going out to the shed to look at the bicycle under its cover. Sometimes he would lift the sheet just to make sure the bicycle was still there and that he had not dreamed the whole thing. Roberto also spent time preparing for Sofia's birthday party. He did not have much money to spend on decorations or fancy food, but he wanted to make the day special for her. He invited some of the neighbor children, including Maria from the park, who had become Sofia's good friend. Roberto also invited the neighbors who had helped him with the bicycle project. Rosa, the old woman who lived next door, offered to help Roberto make a birthday cake for Sofia. Diego, the young man who was good with machines, offered to help Roberto set up decorations in their small yard. Roberto was grateful for all the help from his neighbors and friends. On the morning of Sofia's birthday, Roberto woke up very early. He was too excited to sleep any longer. He made Sofia's favorite breakfast of eggs and toast with jam. He also made hot chocolate, which was a special treat that they only had on important occasions. Roberto was smiling so much that Sofia asked him why he seemed so happy. Roberto told Sofia that birthdays were always special days and that he was excited to celebrate with her. Sofia was also excited because she knew that Roberto had been working on some kind of surprise project in the shed. She had asked him many times what he was building, but Roberto had always told her it was a secret. After breakfast, Roberto helped Sofia get dressed in her prettiest dress. It was a blue dress with small white flowers on it that matched the bicycle perfectly. Roberto had not planned this, but he was happy about the coincidence. Sofia looked beautiful and Roberto felt proud to be her father. The neighbor children started arriving for the party around noon. Maria brought Sofia a small present wrapped in colorful paper. The other children also brought small gifts or homemade cards. Roberto was touched by the kindness of all these people who cared about Sofia and wanted to make her birthday special. Roberto served simple food like sandwiches and fruit to the children. Rosa brought the birthday cake she had made. It was a simple cake, but it was decorated with 9 candles and had "Happy Birthday Sofia" written on it in pink frosting. Sofia was delighted with the cake and all the attention from her friends. After the children finished eating, Roberto told everyone to gather in the front yard. He said he had a very special surprise for Sofia, but that everyone needed to be quiet and patient. Sofia's eyes were bright with excitement and curiosity. She had no idea what Roberto had planned for her. Roberto went to the shed and carefully wheeled the covered bicycle to the front yard. All the children and neighbors gathered around to see what was under the sheet. Sofia was bouncing with excitement in her wheelchair. She kept asking Roberto what the surprise was, but Roberto just smiled and told her to wait. Roberto positioned the covered bicycle right in front of Sofia's wheelchair. He looked at his daughter's eager face and felt his heart fill with love and pride. This was the moment he had been working toward for 3 months. Roberto hoped that Sofia would love the bicycle as much as he had loved building it for her. Roberto took hold of the bedsheet that was covering the bicycle. He looked around at all the faces watching him and Sofia. Everyone was quiet and waiting to see what Roberto had created. Sofia was holding her breath with anticipation. Roberto smiled at his daughter and slowly began to pull away the sheet to reveal her special birthday present.